Real quick before we start, in the comments down below there is a pinned comment where you can leave your questions for me because I am doing a Q&A to celebrate 700 subscribers. The questions can be D&D related, they can be me related, they can be whatever. Just go down the comments down below if you have any questions for me. And without further ado, let's get on with the show. Today on RPG Horror Stories, we have a player who tried to take control of a D&D party and threw a complete tantrum when that overwhelming control was taken away. Without further ado, let's get started. Back in 2016, I was the GM to a Savage Worlds group in a contemporary post-apocalyptic scenario that had been running for a few months when Cass, name of the character that I'll be using to refer to the player since their personalities were virtually indistinguishable, entered the picture. To me and everyone else, he seemed like a pretty reasonable guy at first, though looking back, some red flags were already visible on our first session. First time playing, I felt like I completely lost control as a GM. He had made a huge list of items he wished to start with the justification that his character would be at a disadvantage compared to others. This was something we already accounted for, so there was no reason to give him all these items. He also convinced me to alter the stats of some of the weapons he wanted because he was unsatisfied with them, thinking that they were too weak. We had some back and forth on the matter, but eventually I allowed him most of what he wanted. After we started, he immediately took control over the party, what they did and where they went. If the party was willing to give him that leadership role, I really didn't have much of a problem with it, but that was a decision we would all come to regret deeply. Cass's highly controlling nature quickly spread beyond the role of a player, and before I realized, every time he was unsatisfied with the loot he got, or his character's performance in the game, or the attitude of an NPC towards him, he would voice it loudly. That could range from simply making small regards on what he didn't like multiple times throughout every session he was present, to completely stopping the session for 5 to 10 minutes to directly discuss the matter with me until either I convinced him, in which case he would act very visibly frustrated for the next half hour, or alternatively he just got what he wanted. Now at this point it's clear that I had some degree of blame in all of this. I was still a teenager at the time and wasn't used to dealing with conflict, at least not to this degree. At the time, I had a highly anti-confrontational nature. Combined with my lack of experience as a GM, it made me really lenient when dealing with Cass and the other players at times. I slowly grew to change, but before things got better, they still got a bit worse. Before I began taking away the power I slowly gave to Cass, I grew tired and apathetic and gradually stopped engaging in his discussions and started to just accept what he said more and more, which only gave him more liberty. That led Cass to have the power to overperform in any task by challenging any piece of information that wasn't beneficial to him. For example, I tell him he missed a shot, he says he hit anyway. Making slight changes to rules because they either benefit him or just because he wants to, usually just to make his own weapon stronger. Rewrite NPCs' personalities so everyone is either friendly to him or only needs a small favor in the form of a quest or money to devote their lives to him. Cass then started a small cult of NPCs centered around him, overruling my words and making changes to the story. That usually happened either because things developed in a way he wasn't expecting and therefore should be changed, or because he misunderstood plot points and, of course, now they had to be altered to fit what he thought was the case, or simply because he wasn't satisfied with how things were progressing. Another particular aspect of Cass to be noted was the way he seemed to view and play the game. The best way to describe it is that it felt like he thought he was playing GTA or Skyrim or any open world video game that allows you to act however you want with little to no consequences. It's not like he didn't understand the concept of role-playing, because he did and was a part of it, even if his character was literally just himself. He was also extremely aggressive and would chase, kill, and loot anything that expressed any hostility, which is pretty bad for many obvious reasons, but worse in our scenario since a big part of our game was measuring which enemies to pursue, which causes to get involved in, who to befriend, and who to anger. With Cass, the party was constantly getting into battles and conflicts too big for them to deal with and angering too many factions at once everywhere they went, which made it impossible to stay in one place too long and make any meaningful alliances. At this point, Cass was not popular among the rest of the group, either in-game or in real life. Though we were all friends in a sense, it was clear everyone was having more fun playing whenever he missed a session, and looking back, his relationship with one of the other players could not be described as anything more than straight up bullying. Gradually, I regained control of the game and gained a much firmer grip on it. With time, I stopped every instance of Cass trying to manipulate something that was beyond his power as a player and reverted what I could of the characters and world around it, to some ironic complaints from Cass that the NPCs were acting out of character. Cass also immediately reverted to his old strategy of interrupting the game to complain about how everything went and didn't revolve around him. This time, however, I overruled any and all of them immediately and proceeded with the game. For some limited time, this appeared to be enough. Cass became very bitter, but everyone else was having a much better time. Our hero grew only more frustrated, and his anger was not only directed at me, but at the whole rest of the table, probably because at that point, no one interacted much with him beyond the necessary. His frustration would then culminate in one big incident. One of the aspects of our game that I briefly touched on was the politics between different groups, which means the players were always looking to make strong allies to help fight their enemies, and there's a big emphasis on diplomacy. Our party of travelers had recently made an alliance with an isolated sedentary group. They had considerable size and power, and after completing some tough quests, our relationship showed promise. After returning from the most difficult quest by far, the players were excited to finally meet the leader of the group. There were definitely some bad feelings from the loss of an NPC provided by this group to assist the party, which could hurt their credibility, but that was nothing compared to what was about to come. The party was led to be personally congratulated by the leader in his office. They were allowed to keep their weapons around him both as a demonstration of respect and trust, but also to show the high level of his personal guard, implying they knew they could stop any attempt on the leader's life. That was a point made expressively clear to the whole party. It started well enough. The party was thanked and complimented for dealing with such a dangerous task, and the leader personally handed them their promised rewards. As the players and the leader laughed and talked about future prospects, Cass angrily started to complain about his loot, saying he deserved much more. The leader was annoyed but not angry and stated their reward was exactly as promised, which led to more protests from Cass that were ignored as the leader returned his attention to the other players, who were both trying to further their relationship with him and keep Cass from ruining the occasion. That decision could not have backfired more terribly. Frustrated for being ignored, Cass, with no warning, pulled his gun and shot at the leader. It was not a warning shot. Cass tried to kill him. As expected, the guard stopped his attack, but before they could surrender him, Cass ran out of the room in order to attempt to take control of the entire base. It was an obviously ridiculous task, but that couldn't stop him. He ran down the hallway, shooting down every person in his way, again with no warning, and making no distinction of civilians or security guards. He quickly realized no one from the party ever moved to help him and promptly commanded them to take up arms and assist him. Suffice it to say, no one did a thing. They all refused to help. Frustrated but not shook, Cass continued his assault until he was cornered and captured, fighting until the very last moment. Cass was judged and sentenced to life in their prison, and the rest of the party, lamenting the opportunity and work that went to waste, was sent into exile. Cass expected them to break him out, but the party laughed at the notion of doing anything of the sort. Since his character had no way of escaping and no one was going to help him, he was considered dead by all intents and purposes, and Cass was going to make a new one. He quit the session and went away, and we thought we would never see him playing again. He did actually come back 1 or 2 sessions later to act pretty much the same as before. With no lesson learned, his new character, Jay, stayed for some more time until Cass had to move somewhere else IRL and effectively leave the group. Jay became an NPC and died on his first session as such. No one bothered to bury him, and he was left on the side of the road where he died. TLDR, player thinks the game revolves around him, stops the session again and again until he gets what he wants, and turns everyone off of the game. Once again, we see a player who really wants that leadership position in the party when they definitely have not earned it. Of course, they're also a bit of a murder hobo, so that doesn't really work either. However, that leadership position needs to be something that's agreed to by the entire group. You can't just take over a D&D party. That's not going to work. Of course, D&D parties are naturally going to have a leader, someone who's directing the flow of the game, and sometimes that position is going to change hands a lot depending on what part of the game you're in. However, it needs to be agreed by the rest of the party, and you need to make sure, even if you are the leader, you're doing everything for the group, not for yourself, like Cass over here. The fault is with Cass. However, if you're a DM in your party, don't let this kind of thing happen. I know that the DM doesn't necessarily need to be the adult role at the table, but that's often what the DM falls into. If you see a player at your table taking control of the game and almost railroading the party themselves and turning the whole game into a murder hobo fest with the party not really enjoying it and you're not really enjoying it, then you need to put a stop to it. You don't need to let Cass go on this whole murder hobo rampage through the compound and let him kill a bunch of people. Sometimes it's good to say no. A lot of DMs need to learn the power of the word no. It's simple, but it is effective. In summary, don't be like Cass, and don't let people be like Cass at your table. If you enjoyed this episode of RPG Horror Stories, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more episodes of RPG Horror Stories as well as my other series, then please do subscribe to Crispy's Tavern. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go to the comments down below. In essence, like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.